Hi, hello there. Hope you're doing great. Today we are going to try to analyze a poem and find ways to do that. So, bring your beverage you like and let's start analyzing. First, the poem we are going to analyze is The Cola by George Herbert. First thing we need when we analyze a poem is to know about the poet's background, and personally, I don't want to know much information about him. Because I don't care, it will not come in the exams, probably, if the exams weren't, um, multi choices. So, what I gathered from the poet's background is he's born in 1593 in Wales. Herbert's poems are characterized by precision of language and ingenious use of imagery or conceit, which we will see in his poem, which was favored by metaphysical poets. Um Here, what we mean by metaphysical poets, you need to, um, well, have a little information about the metaphysical era. So, in order to do that, I'm going to bring you back to this, PDF about metaphysical poetry. So, the era began in 1572. If we had to define this era, the definition will be it is a style of poetry that emerged in 17th century, as we said. England, to the contrary, the term metaphysical was coined by Samuel Johnson. This is an important point. In the 18th century, I don't think 18th, I think 17th, but oh well. Nobody cares. The word itself comes from the Greek meta, so meta here comes from Greek, which means beyond, and physical. So this whole word, come from Greek. The first part means beyond, the second part means physical, implying focus on questions that go beyond tangible words. So, if we want to explain the word, here's the explanation. If we were to define the term metaphysical poetry, here's the definition. Third thing we need to know about this era is the style was used in this era. The style is characterized by a blend of intellect and emotion. That is pretty obvious from the poems we had studied, like the Cola, like the previous one, which is called Death Be Not Proud, and the preoccupation with the abstract philosophical and spiritual questions. That is bullshit. This is important. And this is important. It is highly intellectual from a poetry or a form of poetry. So the form here is intellectual, often using complex arguments, which we'll see in our poem today, The Cola. There is a complex argument, logical reasoning. I don't think so. We do not have logical reasoning in our poem today. We have emotions, explore topics. Yeah, that's must have in all poems. Metaphysical conceit. So this term you could find in your textbooks, in the glossary, in the end page, but personally I didn't like the definition which was in the textbook, so I wrote my own from the internet. So this is the most famous feature. A conceit is an extended and elaborate metaphor. So it is an extended metaphor. that makes a surprising comparison between two dissimilar things. That's what's important about conceit. It makes surprising comparisons between two dissimilar things. Bring two dissimilar things, like bring two things and compare them to completely unsimilar things to them. So, for example, in The Caller by George Herbert, which we will discuss, the speaker's struggle with faith is compared to a caller, symbolizing both restraint and rebellion. So the caller here represents something which is restraint. He cannot do whatever he please, but in the same time, it is referring to rebellion. It's referring to something that is dissimilar from it, which we will see in our analysis. So, what we know about this era? We know its definition, the word itself, the style, the conceit, which is the most famous feature. The themes were love and relationships. That theme is not common in this era. Religious, yeah, we talked about religious, and we will talk about religious and spirituality a lot in this era. Mortality and time, sure, we do talk about them, how human experience relate to abstract divine truth. So, the themes is mainly religious spirituality and abstract divine truths. The voice is logical arguments. Always, any poem in this era have an argument. I don't know how. They explore intellect, curiosity, human condition, complex, and faith. Alright, key poets. John Donne, George Herbert, which we studied. Other than we studied, I don't care about them. Devices are conceit, unconventional imagery, and paradox. These are the most common devices in this era. Historical background, what we care about, it is in England in 17th century and the execution of the King Charles I with the rise of Puritanism and the scientific revolution led by figures like Isaac Newton and Galileo. These challenged the belief and encouraged new ways of thinking. So that is the historical background, and these points are important to be in your mind before you analyze any poem in this era. So we are back to here. Metaphysical poets. Now we know what are metaphysical poets. They are poets interested in logical arguments, emotion, intellectual, religious beliefs, divine truths, abstract divine truths. So, yeah. A technique Herbert introduced was the ending of a poem with two quiet lines which resolve the argument in the poem without answering the specific points raised by it. So in here, he didn't answer the question, all the question he been asking throughout the poem, like, shall I be still in suits? Like, is the day, like, is the year only lost to me? He didn't answer these questions, but he gave this two quiet lines with resolution. Methought I heard when calling child, and I replied and we could notice a hint of emotion in these two lines. So Herbert occasionally express his doubts in intellectual terms, but answer them with emotion. As we said, here we have a hint of emotion. Herbert poetry about struggles, religious kind, because he is a clergyman, because he works at church. Of course, he will have struggles about his religions and restrictions and etc. things. So, after we know a little about the poet's background, that he is a religious, let me add that. Let us think, well, let us search about what the religious background of George Herbert. Yeah. Was the 4th Church of England, priest and metaphysical poet whose life was shaped by intense personal pity. This is not pity, I don't know what it is. And final commitment to parish ministry, raised by a religious mother, a transformed grocery, mountains. You're not answering the question. Devotional influence, priest and poet. So he was a priest. Associated with the Via Media middle way of the Church of England, balancing Catholic tradition with I don't care. Well, so he's a priest. That's weird. That's weird. Okay. So he is a priest. He is a priest. Right. That's to be added to his background. So, we need to know the year the poem is written in and the year the poem is published in, because it may come as blanks. So, in analyzing a poem, we need sites to know about other people's perspectives on the poem. So, the sites I usually is script and lit charts and poem analysis. I don't come near those two. Just in necessary times I come near them. So let's see, lit charts. Let's search for our poem in the site. Our poem is called The Caller. Do you have The Caller? Alright, search. Poetry Guide, yeah. Yeah, thank you. This is our poem. So, in this site, we have already searched for our poem. This is the photo of our poet. Looks ugly. George Herbert was a Welsh poet, was also worked an orator. So he's a narrator and a priest. This is an important information you should mention in here. His poetry is often associated with the metaphysical movement, right? So, what else do we have? So here is a comment by Emma. She is an English baccalaureate, minor creative writing. She has BFA, she has BA, so she is a good person to take off information from it, but from her. Alright. The Caller by George Herbert is a 36-line poem about a speaker's struggle for freedom. So we have the struggle for freedom. Here the poet's speaker is struggling for freedom. He wants to be free. Well, from what you want to be free? To struggle with his own religious beliefs. So he wants to be free from his religious beliefs, alright? Now that's clear. Let's continue the comment. The poem does not confirm to one particular rhyme scheme. We said, I don't know if I said that. From the general look to the poem, we actually do not see a specific rhyme scheme. The poem is not in a quatrain, therefore. So, yeah, it's chaos. Why it is chaos? Because to mimic the chaos of his speaker's own thoughts. So the thought of George Herbert is in chaos. So his poem reflects that. That's information we should put in mind. The first element of his piece the reader should take note of is the title. If one understands a bit about Herbert's religious background, the title takes 1 second layer of meaning. The word caller has immediate connotation. connotation. A connotation is the feeling a writer creates through their word choice. It is the idea of specific word or set of words. So if a word has layers, then the poet uses connotation of submission and control, but it also refers to the piece of clothing worn by a member of clergy. So this piece we put in the shirt. Let's search for it. What's the piece of clothing worn by clergy? Let's say that and search for it. I won't emit. Maybe it is this. No. Let's say the cola. Yeah, this one. This is called the cola. You see over here? So that is what he meant by his title, maybe. Well. Yeah. So, as we said, a collar is a piece of clothes. It represents restrictions. So, before we jump into any further analysis, let's read the poem because any analyzer would say read the poem before you analyze it. So, let's read the poem and see what we have. I struck the board. Struck the board means leave, and cried no more. I will abroad. So he wants to rebel. What an idiot. What? Shall I ever sigh and whine? What is the meaning of pine? My lies and life are free, free as the road, loose as the wind, as large as a star. Shall I be still in suit? Have I no harvest but a throne to let me bloat and not to restore? So here we have enjambments. We don't have a punctuation mark between these two lines. That's to be noticed. What I have lost with cardinal fruits, cordial. That's ambiguous. I don't know the meaning of this word. Sure, there was wine before my sighs did dry it. There was corn before my tears did warn it. So here we don't have a punctuation mark. We don't have a punctuation mark. Here we have. So here is enjambment. So he uses a lot of enjambment in his poem. Interesting. Before my tears did drown it, is the year only lost to me? Have I no bays to crown it? No flowers, no grand garlands, gay or blasted. So here he's pleasurable things. I don't care about their meaning. Wasted, not so, my heart, but there is fruit. There is a fruit, sir. Alright, let's see what. And thou hast hand recover all thy sigh blown age. So he's recovering his age. Weird. On double pleasures, leave thy cold dispute, leave your argument. Why? Of what is fit and not, forsake thy cage, thy robe of sands, which pretty thoughts have made, and made to thee. Good cable. So the cable is good. It keep him restricted. Alright, so he thinks about a good cable, a cable which may represent restrictions, and those restrictions are good. Let's continue to enforce and draw and be thy law, while thou didst wank and wouldst not see. Away, take heed, I will abroad. So he does not want to quit his arguments, okay? Let's see. Call in thy death's head there, tie up thy fears. He that forbears, what does that word mean? To sit and serve his need, deserves his load. But as I raved, what does that word mean? and grew more fierce and wild at every word. Methought I heard one calling child, and I replied, my lord. So we've read the poem, we come across some words. We don't know its meaning, so let's see. What's the meaning of this? Alright, so Hashepson over.
Pine. Pine.
Can we listen to this? I don't know. Cordial, which means ودود ودي حلوى محشوة شراب. I think it is شراب. Alright. Forbears, which means the forbears أسلافنا. Alright. He that forbears to suit and serve his need. Alright. Alright. The idea is more clear with the meaning. Raved, spoken about with a great enthusiasm. يتحدثون بحماس. Alright. I raved to grow more fierce and wild at every word. Alright. So with that in mind, we could jump into the analysis. Summary. What is the introduction the people wrote about this poem? The caller by George Herbert describes the speaker's desire to escape from his religious life and turn to one of greater freedom. That's partly true. The poem begins with the speaker stating that he will stand for his present life no longer. Alright, so he will not stay religious. It is time for him to make a change, and he intends to resurrect the parts of himself to the lost in his youth. He will seek out real pleasures and no longer worry about what is right and wrong. Interesting. He seek real pleasures, no longer worry about what's right or wrong. So religious tells you what's right and wrong. Continue as the poem continues. The extent of his confinement. Confinement? What does that word mean? Alright, Sijan. Is relieved. Revealed. Alright. He has crafted a person for himself out of his own belief. The ropes will no longer keep him. The ropes will no longer keep him, and he will utilize his fears to his own benefit. He will be a stronger man, he thinks. The final lines bring the speaker back to his religious reality, the voice of God penetrating. We need to stop recording for a second. So the final lines bring the speaker back to his religious reality. God penetrates through his waving and calms his order. He will not do as he said he would. He has been taken back into the fold of the church. Interesting introduction. Quite like it. Let's see this one. The thing I love about this poem is its deep and enduring sense of unease. Herbert is able to write something simultaneously what تخريبية, okay, and affirmative. The speaker caught between the part of themselves that wishes to worship the divine and the part that feels drawn to the transit. It remains one of the most powerful explorations of faith and doubt. So it explores faith and doubt, alright? I have never read Maya and discussed the poem and its relation to the metaphysical movement in the fascinating. So what does this site mean by metaphysical? Marked by the use of elaborate figurative language, urging conceits, paradoxes, and philosophical topics, as we explained. So our explanation is great. What the charts have in the introduction? The British poet George Herbert first published the caller in his famous was published in 1633. We have the publishing year. That's good. Collection of devotional verse, the temple. Alright. Let's add that in case we need it in blanks questions. And this autobiographical poem, a clergyman raged against all the limitation of religious life, longing for freedom and pleasure rather than duty and endless gold-ridden self-security. But no matter how much he struggles, he just can't get around to facts. God exists, and he has a calling to serve his Lord. Religious faith, his poems just can feel more like a burden than a consolation, but that does not mean one can run from it. I quite not like their introductions, they're boring. Let's see, was I already searching for it? Yeah, let's see what this PDF provides. Man, really? Just the poem? Um, Oriented with a Persian analysis of everything that he has been taught and believed to be true is cage. He sees these truths. I think it is cut it. It's not the whole PDF. So let's search for another one. There's 2 pages, minimum wage and background blue and big colored. No. No. Yeah. That's look great. Let's see what it has. So, by George Herbert, written in this era. So, written, we have the written year. So here we have, no? Why did that? It is one, I think, like this. Oh, I don't want to copy, don't you worry about that. Alright. Lines 1 to 31, and lines 1 to 31 in the long segment that is enclosed in quotation marks. The speaker reports statements that he made. To whom was he talking when he made those statements? To himself only? To himself and Satan? To Satan only? To himself and God? To God only? So these are multi-choices, well, questions. Interesting. When the speaker said my lines and life won't be as large as a star, what did he mean by star? A shop? A burning place? Abundance? Interesting. These are interesting questions. But this PDF is important for the final. Alright. The best answer is A. Okay, so the answer sheet is existing in the same file, which is quite nice and interesting. But we want analysis, so let's save that as get. But we want analysis, please. Usually the call a poem, 1 page, no. 5 pages, yeah. This seems to be right for us. Alright. The Coda summary. George Herbert's The Coda examines the ironic and emblematic dimensions of the poem's temptation of rebellion. The speaker's desire to seize the fruits and to escape his cage, the robe of sands, ironically ignores the security of fulfillment the collar or yoke offers in the crucible of 17th century and the plight of man yearning for spiritual liberation. There is so many words I don't know its meaning. also paradoxically signifies true freedom. Here is an important idea, my dears. Paradoxically signifies true freedom. Jacob Catt's book of Empress makes it obvious full of childish rebellion and the wisdom of servitude and drudgery. The Montes complementary plan further underscores the contrast between the mild fetters of the yoke and the new collar in certain rebellions, though he would repudiate the burdens of service and deny the cross-cursed law in his heart that defines Peter cannot ignore. The short-sightedness tactically and ironically presented the poem's mounting biblical and emblematic association. This is bullshit. I don't not understand, but one line, which is also paradoxically signifies true freedom. So I have to write the introduction myself, which is sucks. So, um, well, the first line should be George Herbert. George Herbert poem. Is it a poem or a sonnet? I think it is a poem. The caller written. Fuck, fuck, fuck yeah, written. And as we said, 50-30 and published, or we could say published. We could say that published and this year is one of his famous poems, famous religious poems. That's a good introduction sentence. Now we should talk about our topic. So I think what I think about the poem, I think it talks about restrictions that the poet feels, the speaker feels, and he argues throughout the poem that these restrictions are bad and he wants to be free from them, but at the end, we have him saying, "Blade, my lord," which he is, well, submitting to the restrictions and thinking of them as good restrictions. So, well, uh, what should we do in this poem? Yeah, in this poem, we could see, we could clearly see that the poet or the speaker, in any case you love, is struggling from his religious beliefs, I think. Believes and want to get and want to be free from them. He sees them as restrictions. That's wrong. Let's say the correct spelling. Restrictions. Restrictions, so you want an I in here? Okay. Restrictions. He sees them as restrictions which he wants to repel against. Not repel. I don't know how to spell repel. Let's say a protoform. Where is it? Uproad. So here, like that. Uproad, yeah. All right. They do that. They do that. He states that through is or let's say logical arguments, logical arguments throughout the poem. The poem. But finally, but finally, he sees or he realizes how to write realize. Fuck you. Realize. Okay. So I think it is this. Let's make sure. Realize. Yeah, it is true. He realizes these restrictions restrictions are good and keeps him in his ego area. Sorry for that, a lot of interruptions. George Herbert's poem, The Caller, published in 1633, is one of his famous religious poems. In this poem, you could clearly see that the poet or the speaker is struggling from his religious beliefs and wants to be free from them. He sees them as restrictions which he wants to uproot from. He states that through his logical arguments throughout the poem. Finally, he realizes these restrictions are good and keeps him in logical area before the conclusion. The dominant themes of the poem is metaphysical themes, is metaphysical themes such as, well, intellectual. Let's see the themes. What do we have themes in here? Love, religious and spirituality, experience related, abstract divine truths. Okay. So, the dominance of the multiple themes such as religious and challenge and, well, exploration of divine truths, abstract abstract divine truth. نقطة. In conclusion, the poem challenges religious reflection throughout logical arguments. That's a solid and good introduction. We have to analyze it in lines. Hello again. After a long forced break, we're back. We are going to write the first part of our analysis to the caller. So let's go to our sites. Here we are at the chats. Let's say what they have to say. I pounded the table and shouted, "That's it, I'm leaving. Am I meant to sit around feeling bad forever? I can do what I please. My life is free as the open road, wandering as the wind, and overflowing with possibilities. So why should I behave like a servant? Do I get rewards besides tables of guilt and sorrow, with no refreshing pleasure in return? I know that I used to relish wine before I dried it all up with my heavy sighs, that I ate fresh bread before I swagged it in my tears, and I am the only person who does not get to have any fun this year. Has this stretch of time earned me no celebrity, bequests, no triumphed crowns or laws, no beautiful wreaths to honor my brilliance? Are those all faded and withered away? Absolutely not, old boy. Pleasure still exists, and you can go and grab it. Make up for your long years of guilt and suffering by enjoying yourself twice as much. How terrible is that resolution? Stop fretting about morality all time. Give up this false cage, this fake net you've made for yourself out of your own thoughts. Those ropes have worked pretty well to force you to obey the moral rules you made up. You refused to see that they were all your own inventions, not real laws. I said that's it. You listen to me. I'm getting out of here. Call off that menacing skull that's meant to remind me of death. Lock your fears away. It is the people who don't do exactly what they want who deserve the bursts of guilt and duty. Um, but the longer I wanted and raved like this, the more I thought I could hear a voice calling to me as a child, and I answered my lord. It is good explaining. They try to explain the poem line by line, simplifying it. It's good. We may have more clear idea when we read that. So moving on to the themes, the weight of faith, the weight of faith. So weight means ثقل, فثقل الإيمان. Speaker in George Herbert's The Caller feels collared, both literally and metaphorically. He is a priest wearing the traditional white dog collar, and he can't escape the demands of his Christian faith. Feeling weighed down by his duties and his conscience, he longs to do whatever he wants without religious scruples tapping him on the shoulder, or at the very least to be rewarded for all the sacrifices he makes for his religion. In his frustration, he even starts to convince himself that his beliefs are just an illusory cage. Is built from his own thoughts, but the more he struggles to be free, the more he he hears God summoning him back. Religious faith and religious calling. This poem suggests can feel like a heavy and unrewarding burden, but ultimately God just can't be ignored. Interesting introduction. Faith, the poem suggests, can feel restrictive, and its rewards aren't always clear. Fed up with agonizing over what is fit and not, that is, what is morally correct. The speaker longs to throw off all his scruples means. Without, alright. So, good. And live a life as free as the road. His priestly responsibilities and his intense moral self-examination have left him pierced through through with thorns of guilt and suffering that God does not seem to honor with compensatory pleasures. The speaker feels he is enduring all the pain of his sacrifice, guilt, and confinement. Okay. Without a touch of joy to sweeten the deal. Meanwhile, plenty of other people seem to go about their lives blithely, doing alright, doing what they will, in a moment of self-pity. The speaker wonders if it's only he who has to be so good all the time. When faith seems to offer no consolations, the poem goes on. It's easy for dissatisfaction to turn to doubt, longing for the pleasures of life without religious duty. The speaker starts to talk to himself into the idea that his faith was only ever a robe of sands. Anyway, an apparently tight snare that would actually be easy to shake. Perhaps he thinks the priestly collar he wears is made only from his thoughts, and if he threw it off, he could embrace the double pleasures and praise of a hedon's seeking pleasures as the most important goal. Life without a burdensome conscience. But God, the poem concludes, can't be escaped so easily as robe of sands, right in the minds of his fierce wild rebellion. The speaker hears God calling child, and finds himself answering, my Lord. Faith, the poem thus suggests, is not just a robe of sands, a net of thirst that interrupts people too weak to strike out on their own. It is a response to an inescapable fact. The speaker ultimately has to admit that God exists and must be obeyed whatever he likes or not. It does not mean that faith is simple. If the speaker acknowledges that he is a child of God, he will also have to accept that God does not choose to give him free willing and pleasurable life, at least not at the moment. But then the very fact that God calls the speaker child also suggests that God is loving burdened with the speaker's best interest in mind. Even the speakers can't always see how faith, especially the kind of faith that calls people to priesthood, might often be heavy, and it is not guarantee of easy life. Just the opposite. But for the speaker, it's also true that one has to accept. So, from all that theme, we could notice that he's struggling with his faith. His faith had made him, his thought made him restrictions. He wanted to go out of these restrictions. But then he realizes that these restrictions he made. Back. Sorry for interruption. So he feels these restrictions he want to break, but in the end he realizes these are good restrictions. So line by line, this side took the first 5 lines, while this side took the first 8 lines as a stanza. So that's interesting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is line. Okay. Let's see. We don't really like the PDFs we have in this site, so I'll ignore them. Let's see what we have in here. The caller begins with a literal bang. The speaker, fed up, smacks the board, that is the table. So we have a wrong in here. I want to approach to escape from. Escape. Alright. That is the table at which he sits and declares that he is not going to take this anymore. He's going to give up his whatever life as a priest and hit the road, living only for pleasure. Okay. He does not actually tell readers he is a priest. The poem's title does that job for him. The caller here has both straightforward and metaphorical meaning. It is a literal clerical caller, traditional white neckband of Christian clergyman, but it is also a figurative restraint, a set of pillars that holds the speaker back from doing just what he thinks. So we need to talk about the title in the first paragraph, in the first sentences. That should be in our minds. As the poem begins, then the speaker seems like a dog about to snap his leash and chase all the pigeons or big ones his herd desires. He's tired of sitting around being responsible and feeling guilty. Always sigh and thinking over his many sins. He'd rather live a life as free as the road. Listen to the ways he repeats himself as he says so. My life, my lines, my life are free, free as the road, loose as the wind, as large as the star. Where is my mouse? Yeah, his yeah, what is this? On the word free here makes him sound wild with rebellious anger. You can't make me stay, I'm free, and the parallelism of all the similar phrasings sets up blank series of revealing similes. The speaker wants to live a life as free as the road. He wants to follow his nose whenever he likes, no longer bound to his duty, his parish, or his church. If he wants to be loose as the wind, he also wants to be unconscionable, to be unrestrained by laws and rules. And if he wants to live life as large as a star, then he wants to feel that the world is as full of possibilities as a well-stocked larder is with treats, and perhaps to make up for lost time with a stored up feast of pleasures. In other words, the clergyman whose circumstances sound an awful lot like those of his author, George Herbert, seems ready to make like a 20th century hippie or a pre-Christian Epictron, or I don't know what's that word to spell. For that matter, he wants to put his own desires and his own pleasure first, and his poetry, his lines should reflect that free-willing energy. But already the poem hints that pursuing a life of self-centered pleasure might not be as simple as getting up and leaving. Listen to the speaker's rhetorical question. Rhetorical question. What shall I ever sigh and pine? Pine, we said it means, right? And sigh, it is just sigh. The intended unspoken answer is no, I will not. Sigh and pine. However, my sins forever, that's ridiculous and I won't do it. But it is not so easy to run away from guilt and sorrow. Whenever the speaker goes there, he and his feelings will be religious faith. This poem isn't something a person can just shake off like a loose leash, no matter how fed up they are. That does not mean a speaker is not having a serious fit of rage and doubt. The titular caller might also pun on anger, an emotion that the speaker is going to vent in most of his poems and unpredictable lines. So we don't have these, unfortunately. Unfortunately, do we have devices? Alright. So we are going to this site, this lovely site. What we have in here, the first stanza of the caller, the speaker shocks his reader by crying out, seemingly without provocation. What does that word mean? استفزاز تحرير إثارة right. That he has had enough. He says no more. He will not remain in his life any longer. The speaker will uproot. He asks in the following lines if it is necessary for him to sigh and pine. The speaker is becoming more and more sure that it is not his sole purpose in life to want something he cannot have. He is severely dissatisfied with the current direction of his life and is ready to make a change. What we get from this paragraph? So he went to abroad. He asked rhetorical questions with he should be sorrow and he it is necessary for him to be sorrow and to be sad, to be desperate, to, and what else? Becoming more and more sure that it is not his sole purpose, in life to want something he cannot have. He sees himself as being able to live in life and write his lines free as the road. There should be no restraints on what he is allowed to do or say. He sees a future in which his life is loose and resembles the wind. He desires to live in a world as large as he wants to be. So, in this line, he talks about I'm crying, I don't want this anymore. In this line, he said, okay, I will brood, what shall I ever sigh? I'm blind, so shall I be this sorrow and sad? He wants his line and life to be free as the road. There should be no restraints, which means what he is allowed to do or say is the future in which a life is loose and resembles the wind. The following lines are used to ask if it must be still in suit. He wants to know if it is possible for him to change his life at this time, or he's trapped in the world he has made around himself from his thoughts. The next phrase proposes on type of life could be living, one he cannot escape from in this scenario. He compares himself to a plant that produces no fruit but only thorns, on which he cuts himself. It is the blood he loses that he hopes to use to reinvigorate, impart vigor or vitality to an idea. Himself, perhaps he can benefit from his own present suffering. Okay, we'll see about that. So, um, the first stanza, so yeah, we will say that in the first stanza, the speaker shocks his reader by crying out. Um, uh, the first time, or before. How can we implement that idea? The title of the poem. The title of the poem. What was they talking about in here about the title? Okay, he does not actually tell the readers he's a priest. The poem's title does that job for him. So the poem title of the poem tells, sorry, the reader about the speaker identity. For the word caller has what's both straightforward and metaphorical meaning. Both straightforward and metaphorical meaning. First, it is a literal. First, it is a literal clerical caller. Literal clerical caller. The traditional white neckboard of Christian clergyman of Christian. How to pronounce to spell Christian? Christian. Why is that wrong? Christian. Golf. Christian. I said that too. It has to be capital. Fuck off. Christian clergyman. Alright. Second, it's a figurative restraint. It is a figurative restraint, a set of beliefs that holds the speaker back from doing just what he likes, which means a set of beliefs that holds the speaker back from doing just what he likes, back from doing just what he likes. Oh shit, what am I doing? Back, sorry, back from doing what he likes. Alright, that will do it above the title. And the first quatrain, or we don't have quatrains, we would say just as the poem begins, as the poem begins, well, the speaker principally is crying, surprisingly is crying and wants. That was a big interaction I had. So let's continue. Just as the poem begins, the speaker principally is crying and wants to smack the table and give up on his religious beliefs. It just believes. Be free. And be free to wonder. And sorry. And he wondered if he should stay in his sorrow and sadness. He declares that he wants his lines, the lines he writes, and his life to be to be free, and he gives us 3 images of freedom. He wanted freedom to desire. First, sorry. My lines in life as free as the road. As free as the road, which suggests what it's that suggesting. Let's see. There should be no restraints on what he is allowed to do or say. That he wants Sorry. No restraints on what he wants, on what issue. He is allowed to do or say, or allowed, how spelling that? Allowed. Alright. To do or say. Second, as free, let's be back. As the road, loose as the wind. Loose as the wind, which suggests okay, restrains he sees future in which his life is loose and resembles the wind. He wants a life that resembles a wind. Resembles a wind. What's is wind symbolism? Let's we don't need that. Wind symbolism. Yeah. Change, transformation, freedom, and unseen powerful forces. What love resembles a wind, which usually symbolizes freedom. What are we doing in here? So, back into here. A wind which usually, suggests freedom, powerful force, and what else we could add to that list? Powerful forces, freedom, unseen, change. All right. So change. Okay. Third, which is the last, I think. So the last we will say finally. As large as the third, yeah, finally. As large as the star, which suggests what possibilities, endless possibilities. Yeah, possibilities. All right. Shall I be ensued? Have I no harvest but a thorn to let me bleed and no restore what I have lost with the cordial fruit? The following lines are used to ask if he must be still ensued. He wants to know if it is possible for him to change his life at this time, or if he is trapped in the world he has made around himself. The next phrase proposes one type of life he could be living when he cannot escape from. In this scenario, he compares himself to a plant that produces no fruit, but only thorns on which he cuts himself. It is the blood he loses that he hopes to use to regenerate himself. Perhaps he can benefit from his own present suffering. Alright. And the next line, so In the next lines, sorry, next lines, the speaker wonders if he could, well, quit his job. His job that he made. Um, his job. Well, let's look at the lines. Have I no harvest but a thorn? Because he thinks he has not harvest, because, and then he makes sorry. Well, wonders if he could quit his job. And then compare himself to a plant that's suggesting, sorry, that's a lot of cheese, suggesting that he has not harvested a thing from his job, but pain and suffering. Just as the plant that produces only thorns, just as the plant that produces only thorns, to let me blood and not to store what I have lost with cordial fruit. Okay? Okay. Finally, speaker is trying why is that wrong? Trying, alright. To convince himself to repel or repel, I don't know. I think this is right. Okay. Moving on to the next set of lines. We'll call it the second stanza for now. Stanza. In the second stanza, alright. Speaker, I actually hate the fact that we are repeating the speaker. We cannot say the poet. It might be wrong, but I will take the risk. I say the poet because I don't want to repeat the speaker. So he tries to remember if there was a point in his life in which there was wine. Before my sure there was wine, before my side did dry, there was corn, before my tears did warn it. As the year only lost to me, have I no ways to crown it? No flowers, no guidelines, gay, all blasted, all wasted, not so, my hurt. But there is fruit, and thou last has hands. In the next set of lies, he tries to remember if there was a point in his life in which there was wine. It would have had to have been before his side had tried. He thinks there is no way the suffering he is going through now has always been present in his life. There must have been days before in which one could find corn and wine. These days would be before his tears did drown it. To some extent, he feels as if his own emotional state is making his already bad situation worse. The second half of the section is made up of a number of questions. He asks if there is any way for him to crown, to save his year he does not want to be lost to. The speaker searches for flowers of grand landscape which might be used to improve his remaining days. Two short phrases follow. They sorry for interruption. Let's continue with our analysis, should we? Well, in the second stanza, the poet complains how to write complains about, well, about what he complained. That people have freedom that he does not have. He does not have, such as drinking wine, such as drinking wine, um, doing pleasurable things, or such as drinking wine. Let's leave it there. Or let's add something to it. Well, what should we add? Crown save, he does not want to lose him. Speak search for flowers or groundlings which might be used to improve his remaining days. Drinking wine, finding pleasure in flowers and groundlands. Crawl, Gar, Garlands, Garlands. All right. You might use to improve remaining his days. Two short phrases for well required flowers have been blasted, wasted, and his hurts his very spirit. So the poet complains about the people who have freedom that he does not have, such as drinking wine, finding pleasure in flowers on grand lands. What else can we add? Mm-hmm. Which may suggest you want to save the remaining bit of his life, of his year, his year, by finding pleasure in these things, by finding pleasure in these things, he has being restricted from, restricted from. So what do we have? Not so my hurts, but there is fruit, and thou hast hands. I think that is another paragraph. Convincing himself aright, fill with sense. Let's just stop and think for a second in here. Not so, my heart, but there is fruit, and thou hast hands. So he think that there is a fruit, but his hands did not will harvest it. Um, and here they inquire the flowers have all been blessed or races. The bounty lands clarify that no, they have not. In his fruit there is fruit still with his hands. He plans to retrieve that fruit along with his happiness. So let's continue. In the last two lines, two lines. Speaker, which uh, uh, wonders, acknowledge, acknowledge, not sure how to write this word. Acknowledge, acknowledge, acknowledge that there is still a fruit that can be harvested, but my hands didn't harvest. But my hands did not harvested. Harvest, yeah. Yeah, harvested. Mm-hmm. And he asked why. Recover my thy sigh, all thy sigh blown age on double pleasures, thy cold dispute on what is fit and not, forsake thy cage, thy robe of sands, which pity thoughts have made and made to thee. Good cable to enforce and draw, and be thy love, while thou dost drink and wilt not see. Away take heed, I will approach. Alright, so the second half of the caller begins with the speaker asking a number of different things of himself. First, he wants to recover the pleasures of his past and leave behind his cold disputes. Conflict is a plot device used by writers when two opposing sides come up against each other. Of what is fit and not, he is done wasting time worrying about what is holy, proper, or good. These things will no longer interest him. It is his goal to leave behind his cage and rope of sands. These means of confinement that the speaker mentions were crafted by religion and by his own hands. They were made by British thoughts and turned into good cable, which was able to enforce and draw and turn it into law which he obeyed, is no longer going to be a part of his lifestyle, is moving on away from his confinement and collar. The final line repeats a declaration which appears at the beginning of the poem, I will abroad, he will debate. So the second part of the poem, yeah, begins with the speaker desire to do pleasurable things that will fill him with desire, will fill him with sense. Um, thus, throughout the poem, he's been sorry, argue, arguing about what is good and not. And he describes that as good cable and good cable that's made of sand thoughts, tiny thoughts. If, from that we could notice a paradox. Sorry, paradox. Uh, a paradox. How to explain that? Throughout, previously in the poem, previously in the poem, and previous lines, but sorry, that was too much. In the previous lines, he was complaining. Complaining about its restrictions. Now he described them as good restriction that he had made for himself. Complaining that he had made for himself. Thus, let's improve a little in here. So the second part of the poem begins with the speaker desiring to do pleasurable things that he feels with sense. Thus, throughout the poem, he's been arguing about what is good and not, and he describes that as good cable. It's good and not. He describes that as good cable that's made of tiny thoughts. From that, we could notice a paradox. In the previous lines, he was complaining about his restrictions, and he describes them as good restrictions. About his restrictions, and now, now, and now he described them as good restriction that he made for himself. Thus, he may consider them good. Thus, these restrictions will keep him away. Will keep him away from falling into sins into sins and his ego, his id, in psychological terms. Psychological terms. How to write psychological? Psychological terms. Keep him away from falling into sins and his id in psychological terms. Sins shown as cable, shown as the good cable. Okay, we'll keep him away, alright. So that is the paradox of the irony. Furthermore, this creates an irony. An irony. An irony from the title of the poem. Till this moment, till this moment, lines, he was well, talking, speaking, telling, writing about negative things. So let's go with talking about negative things. About how negative the picture, about how negative and bad the restrictions is. But now his ego shows that these restrictions are good to help you keep you in your limits. Keep you in your limits by God. And your limits set by God? Okay. That's a great paragraph we wrote. What else? So, but now Ezekiel tells him that these restrictions, the core, are good and positive, are good and positive to keep you in your limits set by God. طوق النجاة اللي يستخدموه البحارة للبحر شي يسمونه طوق النجاة أو شي like هيجي ring, safety buoy, lifeline, flotation device. Children must wear flotation when playing near the water. Flotation device. And positive. It's like just like flotation. No, stop. Just like flotation device used to save children not to drown in the water. Children not to drown in the water, to keep him in your limits. You in your limits by God. Restriction, the calling. Alright. So we're done with that paragraph, but here take heed. Alright. Let's jump into the next and the final lines, I think. Call in thy death's head, there tie up thy fears. He that forbears to suit and serve his need deserves his load. But as I raved and grew more fierce and wild at every word, methought I heard no one calling child, and I replied, my lord. The final section of the caller concludes the narrator's agitated speech and produces a slight twist to the narrative. He continues speaking to himself and tries to boost his confidence for the change he is trying to make. The speaker asks that the death's head leave him alone. He does not want to be bothered by his fears. It is his intention to tie them up and force them to serve his purpose. Speech ends with the set of lines that utilize the rhyme scheme of ABAB. They are used to bring the speaker back to his known reality. He describes how his raving came to its climax. Okay. Okay. We said okay. We said okay. Please. Came to its climax, and rather than building him up, it just brought on the voice of Paul, the speaker heard child, and replied, my lord. So, in the final line, the final section of the poem, speaker, well, let us do that. A speaker what concludes that his speech and produces a slight twist in the narrative. He continues speaking to himself and tries to boost his confidence. Tries to boost his confidence. For the change he's trying to make, for the change he has been trying to make, Death's head, leave him alone. He does not want to be bothered by his fears. Therefore, he leaves his fears behind, bothered of them, not bothered them, and then when his raven arguments arrive at its climax. Its climax, the speaker heard the voice of God, which immediately bring him back, brought him back to his religious field, hold or field, whatever. Where is my mouse? Bothered. Therefore, yeah, confidence. Sorry. Confidence. Confidence, yeah. So by that, I think we reached the end of the detailed meaning or analysis. Now we are moving to figures of speech. of speech, which should be the final thing we will discuss in this poem that seems it has no ending. So figures of speech, we have paradox, we have conceit, we have imagery. Let's see what we have. So we do not have no longer any devices, so we are going back to here, searching for devices. The color symbols backing up the diff head. Okay. Plants, fruits, and flowers. You could read that if you want. Figurative language. Conceits. That's what we want. The color is built around the conceits of, well, the color, the clerical dog color, the speaker wears becomes a metaphor for the inescapable clothes, religious faith. The speaker wears a clerical collar. He is Christian priest, a guy who has devoted his whole life to faithful service. As the poem begins, he's fed up with this is a lot of talking about the device. Well, we will not take it from here. And this, when we arrive to figures of speech, we will use AI, conceit, and the color by George Herbert. George Herbert. The call by George Herbert is built around the central metaphysical conceit of clerical color presented the speaker's suffocating religious contrast, as discussed in the color. It acts as a double-edged metaphor. A dog's collar restrains slavery and the priestly collar Christian community. It's good explaining. I love it. Bring me back. So conceit. Conceit. Conceit? Okay. The color by George is built around the central metaphysical conceit of a clerical or superior religious. I'm Tasha. Religious constraints. It acts as a double-edged metaphor. A dog's collar yoke restrains slavery and the priestly collar Christian community, ultimately illustrating the soul's fight against God's will. Second device we have, let's see what we have in the second one. Pun. I don't care. Metaphor. Metaphor. Sorry. Metaphor. Alright, great. The Korah uses the central metaphor of priest collar to represent the restriction of religious deity, and spiritual restraint symbolizes the collar of submission to God, clerical collar, and the controller. Sabri, alright. It's good, it's good. Metaphor. Yeah. It's good. Use the central metaphor of priest collar. Okay. What else do we have? You know, devices for kids. We are not kids to write about devices. Similarly, George Herbert the caller utilizes three primary stimuli that is eager to represent the speaker's intense desire, freedom, or just trying the speaker demands to be free as the bird. Yeah, that is enough for simile. No, not like that. Yeah, just like this. Free as the road, unbounded by duty, and restrained by rules, full of unlimited abundant possibilities. For this, not sure about that. These similes highlight the speaker's frustration and his wish to abandon his disciplined, ordained life for drive restraint. Okay. So, simile done. What else do we have? Illusion, rhetoric questions. Yeah. Rhetorical question. The core series of urgent rhetorical question acts as the engine of the speaker's rebellion, represented as yeah. Rhetorical questions. Rhetorical questions. Alright. A series of urgent rhetorical questions acts as the engine of the speakers. Okay. The language is not humanized, it is AI, but fuck that, I don't create, it's just the devices. Who cares about the devices? The idea what is matter. Highlight feeling of frustration, unrewarded effort, and a deep desire for freedom. These are the rhetorical questions if you want to, well, be aware of. Parallelism, repetition, enjambment is an important device. Enjambments. The corollary enjambment, the continuation of a sentence without a pause beyond the end, is used to mimic the speaker's chaotic, runaway emotional grunt against the spiritual instructions. The logo structure. Alright. That's good. I like it. So, enjambment, I think. For example, lines. Where are they? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 7, 8. 7, 8. Alright. This for enjambments. Moving on. Sorry for that. Moving on. Assonance, the alliteration, these are symbol devices you could extract yourself. So I think that was it for The Caller by George Herbert. I hope you enjoyed analyzing it with me. I hope you didn't waste your time. The devices are simple. You could extract them yourself if you have an experience to. So, with that, we've come to the end of our video. Please do leave your comments. What do you think? If you want me to analyze other poems, leave them in the comments and see you in the next video. Goodbye, good viewers.